sit here and talk about French wine and hopefully help you understand labels, regions, and maybe how to pair a few of these things. If you really want to dive deep, head to the Mid-Continent Library and you'll find great books. So first, we're going to talk about labels. Normally when you go to a shop, that's one of the most difficult things to get past with French wines. French believe in terroir and their regions. To them, it's more important to know where the wine came from than what grape it was made with. And that comes from part of the history where they didn't know what grape was actually being grown in this time or in this place. So now with the laws and rules set forth, they've been able to dictate that. But they've kept with the same appellation labeling that is standard today. So let's talk about what you'll find on the label. A couple things that are prominent on all French wine labels. You'll find a producer and you'll find a region, as well as the vintage. A couple of things that you will see also are the house, usually a photo, but that comes from if the house is still standing and is still there from when they received their appellation accreditation. This one here also happens to have the winemaker, her name down here below. Now you'll also find it with another style. This is more of what we're used to finding in the United States or in New World, where it talks about the grape. A lot of times you'll find on the back of the label where it will show the grape breakdown, what's in it, how much percentage, and sometimes you'll find the alcohol level if it's not on the front. Next, we're going to look at regions and appellations. We noticed on the bottles, they talk about the region, and some will even have an appellation. An appellation is just a legally defined area that have rules and regulations that winemakers or houses must follow in order to actually put that appellation's name on their label, on their wine, to state that they actually came from here. The house doesn't have to be there, but the wines have to work within those laws in those regions to use that name. Roan is a big example of negociants, or houses that are in one area and that buying grapes from another area to actually create wines from that one area they bought them from. There are 14 different major regions in France, and there's several hundred appellations. We're not going to dive into all those today. It just doesn't make any sense. But we're going to hit 3 or 4 of the more important ones. And each one of these regions has something different to give, whether it's limestone, chalk, clay. There's so many different types of soil. Burgundy has the most complex soil. They're on an actual limestone shelf in certain areas, so on a completely different plate, if you will. But in each region, you even get tighter with the appellations. Something in that appellation could be the way that it faces during the heat of the day. Maybe it's southwest, and it picks up the best portion to create the best wine. So that has now become its own appellation within that appellation. And the appellation can be as big as the entire region, like Champagne, or it can be a small space, say Côte-Rôtie, or even a vineyard like Romanée-Conti. Burgundy actually owes its quality to the monks and the monasteries when they took it over in the late 7th century. And it was under monastic rule until roughly the late 13th century, 14th century, when Philip the Bold came in and was enamored with this area and decided that he wanted to help the monks and the nobles who were purchasing, because at the time the church was falling out of favor, to keep the quality up. The quality was there. He went so far as to say that Gamay was bad for human consumption, and they should only plant Noir, which is now known as Pinot Noir. Burgundy has a history of over 2,000 years of winemaking, where the Rhone and even Southern have over 2,500 years of winemaking. So with Burgundy, you've got two primary grapes. You've got Pinot Noir and you've got Chardonnay. That's it. You will also see Gamay for a red. There are a few places that still use that to blend in. You'll also see Aligoté, which is another white. Will blend in a little bit to balance or bounce a wine just because it has more acid and a little more vibrancy behind it than Chardonnay does. But it is usually brought in as a blending grape. What you'll find in Burgundy is that the most northern region is Chablis. All white is Chardonnay, unoaked. Back in the day before stainless steel was around or even concrete, they were fermenting in neutral oak large barrels, but it started imparting off flavors. As we go further south, we run into the Côte d'Or. Côte d'Or is predominantly red. It's divided into two regions. The northern part, mostly red, Côte de Nuit. The southern part, after the city of Beaune, is Côte de Beaune, primarily red with some whites. Here you find your structured whites, really elegant, really stylistic type whites. Reds tend to be more balanced here, whereas in the northern they're a little more structured. As you go further south, you get more fruit, almost ripeness that comes across. The cherry tastes a little bit more ripe, where the one you may have tasted more skin. You'll find really elegant, lighter styles in the southern part. As we continue further south, you'll get into Beaujolais. This is where Gamay somewhat retreated to, if you will. Beaujolais isn't Beaujolais Nouveau that you find at the holidays. That's just juice. It's fun to play with, but do yourself a favor. Go find Cru Beaujolais, Morgon, or Fleury, because they have really wonderful elegance and they do well with food. Think of it like this. If Pinot Noir to you is 2% milk, this is 1% milk. So a little leaner, a little lighter, good structure, good tannin, a little more fruit, a little juicier, probably a little better. Put a little chill on the summer day. Works really nicely. So now we head we're gonna head south into the Roan Valley. Rhone could really be divided up into two regions. The only thing that holds the two together is the Rhone River. We have the Northern Rhone. Northern Rhone is all Syrah when it comes to red. When it's white, it's Viognier, Roussanne, and Marsanne. Viognier is dominant for the white. Roussanne and Marsanne tend to bring up different characteristics in the white wines that are produced there. When you look at the valley and where this is, all of the regions are hillside. Depending on which direction they want to face, which direction they're facing, will get you a different profile of acid, a different profile of fruit. The one that's not is actually Crozes Hermitage, and it is down in the valley floor, and it has a little more, if you will, weight behind it. If it can have more weight for Syrah. Syrah is a pretty big grape. As we go further south, to get to Southern Rhone, there's about a 30 to 40 mile gap here between these two regions. Once you get to the southern part, Grenache is dominant. So it's Grenache with Syrah, Mourvèdre, Cinsault, Canois, and Carignan. There are 7 other grapes that are also allowed in this region. They're really obscure. No one really uses them. But in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which is the most recognizable region in the Rhone, they're allowed to use all 13 if they want to. Really only one does, and that is Château de Beaucastel. They're owned by the Perrin family. Probably one of the more expensive Rhones you'll run into, but Perrin makes wines of every value. Now when it comes to white and Grenache, Unge Blanc is outperforms everything down here with Grenache Blanc, Viognier, and Roussanne, and Beurre Blanc. Unglet Blanc is, I believe, the 5th most planted grape in France. Southern Rhone whites are great for summertime. I keep them in my fridge. That's what I have. They don't show a lot of fruits, but they do work well with foods. They do work well because they do have a bit of transparency behind them. Good vibrancy, good weight, really fun bottle to have, and you can pick one up for under $10. The history on the Rhone that was kind of interesting is, in reality, the first wine of note in France actually came from a town called Vienna, not to be confused with Vienna in Austria, but now is the town in the Rhone is called Vienne. And first documented wine of note, good wine if you will, was 1st century AD by the Romans, and it was produced by the Gauls. Even though wine grapes had come over to France when the Greeks and Turks and other Mediterranean immigrated here, they only thought that grapes would grow where fig and olive trees would grow. But their wines weren't that great, pretty, if you will. They were cheap and just not good quality. But the first wine of note, 1 AD in the place called Vienne. Bordeaux is probably the most famous region in France. Arguably, you could bring up Champagne, but Bordeaux has the most notoriety behind it. Bordeaux is limited to 6 red grapes and 3 white grapes. Of the 6 red grapes, the 4 kings are Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. Then you have Malbec and Carmenere. For whites, you've got Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon, and Muscadel. With the reds, for the most part, the best way to know what you're getting when you're looking for a Bordeaux is think about the river. You've got the southern portion, which is the left bank. It's Cab dominant. You'll find Cab blended with Merlot, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, a little Malbec. The right bank, or the northern portion, is Merlot with Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and maybe a little Malbec. One fun note, Merlot is the most widely planted grape in this area, and actually the most widely planted grape in all of France. So Merlot technically is king, not necessarily Cab. The left bank is where you will find the 1855 classifications really started in the Medoc, where you'll find your Lafite Rothschild, your Haut-Brion, your first growths. They command some serious prices. But you will find great wines outside of those first growths. The Medoc is broken into Margaux, Saint Julien, Pauillac. Wonderful, elegant wines. A little more structure, a little more tannin. But the one thing about Bordeaux is it's all about the winemaker's art. It's about blending. When you move to the northern part, you get the Merlot dominant. So the right bank, Merlot dominant, you get more luscious notes. When you add in Cab Franc, it adds in a little bit of texture and structure. When you add in Petit Verdot, it gives you more color and a little fragrance. This is about a blending art, and it's more about what is presented from the appellation. An interesting fact is that Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc created Cabernet Sauvignon. So there's mom and dad, if you will, with the son. Whites are generally on the left bank. There are a few on the right. Always Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon. Semillon adds earthiness, a little bit of stone fruits, and a little bit of weight, where Sauvignon Blanc has a little bit more acid, a little more vibrant, even a slight bit of citrus behind it. Dry whites are fairly common throughout, but sweet is generally found in Sauternes, a small region. And one of the first growths is actually a Sauternes from Chateau Yquem, another one that commands incredible price points. It's Now let's talk pairings. So now we're going to start with chef's first meal, which was mussels. Great preparation. For me, this is simple. I like it this way. I like the flavor of mussels. When I think of mussels, my first thought is Chenin Blanc. Go to the Vouvray, which is in the Loire Valley. What you'll find from a Chenin Blanc or from Vouvray is a more stone fruit with a little bit of mineral, a little bit of salt, a little bit of that stony pebble, and you'll have a vibrancy that'll work well with the herb but not cover the mussels. So you'll actually be able to taste the mussel. Now, if you want to get a little more weight behind it, go to Chablis in the Burgundy, or even go with something a little more Southern Rhone, where you're going to get a little more of that fragrance or floral. You'll get a little more weight. Now, that's like going from 1% milk from Chenin to 2% milk in the Chablis, but you'll get a little bit more. Now, if you have to have a red, try something light, vibrant, maybe a Gamay from the Taurine of Loire. Try to find something that's doesn't have as much fruit, because you will mask everything in a mussel. Next, we have Quiche Lorraine. Quiche Lorraine just reminds me of brunch. It's just what you would have, a nice little meal. For me, the first thing I thought of with chef's menu was white Bordeaux. What I like about this is I've got the Semillon adding some earth that'll take on the proteins, as well as that amplification from the Sauvignon Blanc. It's going to lift it. Everything's going to have some vibrancy. It's going to cut through some of that cheese. Now, if you want to go a little heavier, go to Burgundy or even into Condrieu. Go to Burgundy, get yourself a Puy Fossé or another Chardonnay that has some good oak on it. But what you'll find with those oaked wines is they're not buttery. They don't have that malolactic butterstick thought process. They stir the lees to actually get the roundness there. When you get into Condrieu, now you've got weight without oak, and you've got fragrance because of that Viognier. So you get almost a bit of a fatty, oily note, which will work well with the proteins. Now, if you're like my brother and think 3 pieces of bacon is what's called for, 10 is better. Let's dive into something even bigger and smokier. Let's go red. Go back to the Bordeaux. Get a left bank, get a cab. One thing that's fun is tannin loves fat, and fat loves tannin. So if you've got a tannic wine, eat a piece of fatty meats or oily meat, something oily. If you've got it, just a chunk of prime rib, find a tannic wine. The two marry so well together. Or jump into Northern Rhone to Saint Joseph. You'll get that smoky, earthy note that comes off and it will pair well with the proteins and the Quiche Lorraine. Next, we have a raspberry clafoutis. This was really interesting. We could go a few ways here. My first thought was going towards Alsace. Alsace is a predominantly white wine growing region, but they have a Gewürztraminer there. And the Gewürztraminer has this really interesting floral and baking spice note. These wines aren't always sweet. They're drier. They tend to have a little more lusciousness or a little more ripeness, but not being sugary sweet. What this will do is it will add another layer on top of everything that's going on with this dessert and kind of create a whole new flavor profile throughout. Now, if you want to cut through, find a rosé. A fun little rosé from the Tavel, Grenache base, is raspberries. Raspberries and strawberries, so the berries will pop. The rest of it will kind of be underlying. You could go rosé champagne, because everything goes with champagne. Or another little odd thing you might try is Armagnac or Cognac. So this is what chef has prepared or given you the opportunity to prepare. Now, the one thing I've brought up here is I've given you several options and different thoughts. One, I'm not the one eating, you are. But you'll be able to find all of these at your local store, and they're all affordable. If you want to spend the money, you can. but you'll find these under 15 bucks and 15 to $20. And some of them, like the Gewürztraminer, I picked up for 12. So you can find these relatively affordable. If you choose the first one I spoke about, that was my first inclination. The others were letting you decide if you'd rather taste it this way. My first thought is like, after reading some excerpts, this is like a movie. So when I go to a movie, I want popcorn. And if I've got popcorn, I want champagne. Champagne and popcorn is the best snack. Just make sure you've got a napkin so you don't get your pages dirty. Or try an Armagnac here, because you get this little elegant set where you're holding your glass, you're curled up with your good book, you're enjoying the moment. Or in that case, even if you want to just enjoy the moment, go find that bottle you've been sitting on. Go find the bottle you really want to enjoy and create your own memory, create your own story. Wines are about stories and memories, not pomp and circumstance. Go enjoy yourself, curl up with that book, have some fun.